All right, class. Happy Monday. Hope you guys had a wonderful weekend. I know I personally enjoyed some of the warmer temperatures that we've been having, and I enjoyed the opportunity to send our seniors off with the kind of drive-by parade activity that we had Friday evening. Today, what I'd like you to do is answer some what I would consider to be pretty key questions, and they're kind of generic questions, but I think they're going to create kind of a parameter for how we approach, perceive, and then possibly even practice protest specifically at Christians. So we're going to create those parameters today. Agenda is first I'll share some events that took place over the past week, a devotion to kind of introduce this idea of protest, our posture towards it. Then ultimately you'll answer a handful of questions about creating some protest parameters. Once again, trying to define protest, specifically provide detail about how we perceive it, how we view it, and then also how we would practice it and actually live it out in our lives, if at all. So that worksheet is due 3 p.m. today. My goal for this week is to have a very manageable workload for you, which has been my goal from the start of this. So today's work will be pretty short, and then tomorrow you'll have kind of a project-esque type of activity, but it's going to be scaled down from what it originally was going to be, just to save you some time and hopefully allow you to do other tests and projects in other classes, which I'm sure you'll have plenty of this week. Also, just to give an update on exams, and you should see at the top of your Google Classroom stream reminders about what exam will look like, as well as kind of late and missing work that you can get done. My goal is to actually post your exam this week, Friday morning, and give you all the way to kind of exam week next week to get it done. Usually we don't have an actual exam in this class on your slotted exam kind of time period. So what I'm doing is posting it early because, one, I don't think it'll be that intense for you. I was going to have a project, which is usually the case, but this is just going to be extended response questions. And two, it's just to make sure you can get all of your work done that last week. You guys have worked hard. You guys have adjusted. I really appreciate that. This is unprecedented. It's been cool to see students rise up to the situation. So my goal is to try to have a very manageable last 2 weeks of the school year, just to make things as easy for you as possible while still hopefully doing some work that's meaningful. So first, some events over the past week. One, Congress has introduced a different stimulus bill, an additional stimulus bill, the largest one proposed yet. That was proposed by House Democrats specifically. Will have to go to the Senate, in which it is largely expected not to pass in the Senate. It is expected that Congress will vote along party lines on this bill. For Republicans, their problem with this bill is that it's too soon, it's too large. They would like to wait to see how things go a little bit further, to see how previous stimulus bills are helping out and to see how the reopening of economies will affect what the economy looks like and whether or not they actually need this bill. For Democrats, they're saying the situation is still too urgent to wait and see things out, and this bill is needed now. So it's not expected to pass. It'll be interesting to see if any version of a stimulus bill passes and if there's any sort of common ground Democrats and Republicans can find. And it's especially interesting to see, as states open up, what the economy starts to look like. President Trump has announced his committee in an operation known as Operation Warp Speed to create a kind of nationwide accessible vaccine, which is the key element and component towards us returning to some semblance of normalcy. For President Trump, he has stated that he wants this vaccine figured out and distributed by the start of the school year. That would be coming up this fall, so a couple months. This makes sense. One, we want a vaccine as soon as possible regardless. Two, it will allow students to go back to school. And three, and this is kind of a personal level, obviously having a vaccine before the election at the end of this year will help President Trump as he seeks re-election for presidency the next 4-year term. Last Thursday, there was another protest at the state capitol. This was Thursday. This was smaller than previous ones. Nobody got inside the Capitol building. It was closed. There were a really small group of counter protests as well, but I wanted to bring this up because we are talking about protest in this unit. So another one happened. It was peaceful. Nothing huge happened. Some people brought weapons, and that's been kind of a point of controversy whether weapons should be allowed in the Capitol at all. So other kind of sidetracked issues besides COVID-19 have come into play here a little bit too. But the protest is focused on reopening up Michigan's economy because when you look at what every state is doing, Michigan is in kind of the bottom tier bracket of states reopening. By bottom, I mean we're closed down still a lot. We are kind of one of a handful of states that really haven't reopened much, if at all. I think the only other comparable states that I see in the United States in a similar spot that Michigan is would be Connecticut, maybe like New Jersey, Massachusetts, and possibly Illinois. Wisconsin was hoping to extend their state shutdown, and by hoping, I mean their governor was, not necessarily the people. Their Supreme Court actually denied and said that the governor could not extend that shutdown. So Wisconsin opened up, and I know there were pictures of people in Wisconsin going out to bars and things like that to celebrate. So it's just going to be interesting to see how the states that have reopened, like Georgia, and then many other states too, what the numbers look like as we head into the summer season. It is also hurricane season. I know the first named storm was just revealed. Hopefully, hurricane season will be mild, especially since our economy is really suffering already. The last thing we need is a devastating hurricane in which we need more federal aid and relief. And what that would look like in this pandemic season, I have no idea, but it could be potentially devastating. But hurricane season is starting, so it'll be interesting to see what, if anything, comes from that. And then lastly, Governor Whitmer announced last week that she will be creating a 20-person committee which will work together, consisting of educational decision makers, administrators, superintendents, parents, students, etc., teachers, trying to figure out what this upcoming next school year in 2020-21, what the fall reopening will look like. And there's some nonprofit organizations that are a part of this as well to help guide the process. But there's a really good chance that school will continue to look quite different than usual even as we enter next year. I know for me personally, and my encouragement for you as well, is just to focus on finishing this school year as well as you possibly can. I think if we start worrying about next school year and when we're not a part of this decision-making process, it's going to create unnecessary anxiety. We can have faith that school will resume and that the best decisions will be made. So one thing I want you to consider when you make these or create these responses about protest is, what does the posture of protest really look like? What position should we take? What perception should we take about protest? And quite a few of you talked about in your immigration projects Romans 13, 1 through 2. I'm actually going to ask you to carefully read that on your own, and I would read past it too to get some context. It talks about this idea of submitting to earthly authorities, obeying those who are in positions of rule and authority that God has established. I'm going to ask you to consider, what does that actually mean for you today? This kind of proclamation and statement from Romans 13. Because even though it talks about obeying earthly authorities, does that mean we take it literally all the time? And I would imagine the answer to that is probably a no. No, we should not be just submitting to somebody like Adolf Hitler. I don't know anybody who really would think that, though I know there are some people that have before. We look at biblical examples. We talk about obeying earthly authorities, but that's not what Moses and the Israelites did with Pharaoh in Egypt. Pharaoh said no, and Moses kept going back, and the Lord obviously intervened. But there's other examples too. You look at Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego refusing to bow down to Babylonian gods. You look at people like the Apostle Paul, who got thrown in jail constantly for the message that they preached, which was going against Roman deities, gods, and emperors. So we see biblical examples too where there wasn't complete, full submission to authority necessarily. Or maybe what it means to submit to authority is different than just obeying and doing everything that they say. So I want you to think about that. What does submitting to authority really look like today? How literally do we take that passage? So what I need you to do is answer those questions on the protest parameters worksheet that is due today. There's going to be a classwork grade. I will grade it based on, did you answer the questions completely? Did you show thought and effort towards your answers? Have you expressed ideas in a clear way? So just doing your best is going to be how you get points. There's not necessarily a right or wrong answer. So please answer these questions well, because you will be using them later this week. If you have questions about it, let me know. Otherwise, I will talk to you more tomorrow.